Follow along in your textbook on page 300. We're going to look at an excerpt from the book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. When Upton Sinclair published The Jungle in 1906, he meant to open America's eyes to the plight of workers in the filthy, dangerous Chicago stockyards. Instead, popular outrage focused on the wider-reaching threat of spoiled meat. Congress quickly passed the nation's first legislation regarding the meat and food and drug industries. Sinclair, disappointed by his failures to provoke more sympathy for the overworked, underpaid workers, noted, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit it in the stomach." The next section here is an excerpt from the book. There was never the least attention paid to what was cut from the sausage. There would be meat that had tumbled out on the floor in the dirt and sawdust where workers had trampled and spit uncountless billions of consumption germs. There the meat would be stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from leaky roofs would drip over it, and thousands of rats would race about on it. It was too dark in these storage places to see well, but a man could run his hand over these piles of meat and sweep off handfuls of dried dung and rat. These rats were nuisances, and the packers put the poisoned bread out for them. They would die, and then the rats, bread, meat would all go in the hopper together. This is no fairy story and no joke. The meat would be shoveled into carts, and the man who did the shoveling would have no trouble to lift out a rat even if he saw one. There were things that went into sausage that, in comparison with which poisoned rats was only a tidbit. There was no place for the men to wash their hands before they ate dinner, so they made a practice of washing them in the water to be ladled into the sausage. There were butt ends of smoked meat and scraps of corned beef and all the odds and ends of waste of the plants that would be dumped into old barrels in the cellar and left there. Under the system of rigid economy which the packers enforced, there were some jobs that only paid to do once in a long time. And among these was cleaning out the waste barrels. Every spring they did it, and the barrels would be dirt and rust and old nails and stale water, and cartloads after cartload of it would be taken up and be dumped into hoppers with fresh meat and sent out for the public's breakfast.
Sinclair used the horrors he witnessed as the basis for Jurgis's fictionalized story. As Jurgis discovers, work in the plant involves back-breaking labor in unsafe conditions. When a worker becomes ill or gets injured, he's cast aside, and hundreds of jobless men fight to replace him. Workers in the pickling room have their fingers eaten by acid. Cooks live in danger of falling into open vats of boiling meat.
It was live or die, sink or swim. So the deadened conditions in the slaughtering house and that death that permeated also permeated the battle between the owners and the workers.
It created this traditional, naturalistic, deterministic story in which human beings, just like the animals that are pulled up the chute in the packing plants, and they are pulled up with this sense of optimism at the beginning, this idea of going to America, becoming successful, leaving behind the problems of Europe, and then they go down just like the animals, and they are processed too.
When The Jungle was published, there was a public outcry. Americans were outraged, and they urged the United States Congress to pass the Meat Inspection Act of 1906. More federal laws followed that prevented packers from adding fillers and impurities to meat. And United States Department of Agriculture inspectors were put in every meat plant in the country. But this wasn't the reaction that Sinclair was looking for. He wanted to help the workers. "I aimed at the public's heart," he wrote, "and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." It took decades to improve the working conditions Sinclair criticized in the jungle. The changes came from inside the factories themselves, from members of labor unions making demands of the factory owners. The jungle's pro-worker viewpoint may have been lost on the public at the time, but its powerful message is clear today.
It was a microcosm, a look at the 20th century as it was unfolding in all the different battle lines between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. And in that sense, it's an enduring classic.